Hi, this is Gary with MacMost.com. Today, let's take a look at some Apple products from the past. MacMost is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MacMost.com/Patreon. There you could read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So Apple's product line wasn't always as refined as it is today. There was a period Apple went through where they came out with all sorts of different types of Macs and also all sorts of different types of peripherals for Macs. Let's start by looking at the Macintosh Portable. Before the very first laptops, there were these portable computers. And this one came out before the very first PowerBook, which would have been the PowerBook 100 a few years later. In 1989, Apple basically took the Mac SE and put it into this portable case with a large battery. If you take a look at the design, you could see it was pretty big and heavy and used a trackball as a pointing device. The thing got maybe like an hour of battery time. I used one for a little bit and it pretty much felt like using a Mac SE, but one that you can kind of carry with you like a briefcase. Apple also came out with a Mac that was a TV. It was just called the Macintosh TV and it was basically a Performa Mac from that era around 1993. But you could plug in a cable wire to the back and get TV stations on it in the pre-digital cable TV era. I never really found a market. There really wasn't much use for being able to use your Mac as a tiny cable television. And then in 1997, 20 years after the first Apple computer, they came out with this 20th anniversary Macintosh. It actually was one of the first computers to have an LCD screen built into it. That large square area at the bottom was a CD drive. So it had that built in as well, though it was a weird vertical orientation. This was a limited edition Mac and it was one of the most expensive Macs ever released if you adjust for inflation. It cost $7,500 for the base model. Now in addition to producing the original Apple computer and the Mac, Apple tried to come out with other products. We've seen now that they've been very successful with things like the iPhone, the iPad, Apple TV, but some earlier products weren't as successful. The most well known of those is the Apple Pippin. This came out in 1996 and it was basically like a set-top box version of a Mac. A lot of people claim that this was Apple's attempt at a game console and it did kind of have a game controller with it. But in fact Apple was really going for a multimedia machine that you could plug into a TV. Something less expensive than a computer that you could use to run the popular CD-ROMs that were coming out at the time. A lot of the software produced for it were in fact these multimedia interactive presentations, not actually games. Apple hardly sold any of these. They were a complete failure, but they were a precursor to the current set-top box. As a matter of fact, today's Apple TV is everything that the Pippin was and way more. Of course, another device that Apple came out with was the Newton MessagePad. And this was Apple's early attempt at an iPad. But of course this was before wireless internet. Wi-Fi just didn't really exist then. So this was a completely offline device. Imagine carrying this around heavier than an iPad and only being able to do offline things with it. It tried really hard at handwriting recognition. So you would just write with handwriting on it and it would try to translate that to text. But in practice it didn't really work very well. But the method used by its competitor, the Palm Pilot, that was a lighter, smaller, and less expensive device was much better. It had you write the characters in a special way. And it turns out that that method worked a lot better for entering data into a PDA, a personal digital assistant, in this pre-Wi-Fi era. Now Apple also came out with a lot of peripherals for the Mac that are no longer around. Apple came out with a webcam back in 2003. I had several of these. They were really cool devices. They were just called iSights, which is still a term Apple used to describe some of its built-in cameras. They looked like this. You mounted them on the top of your MacBook or iMac and they added a camera to it. Now when CDs first came out, computers didn't have CD drives in them, so you had to get an external one. Apple had one called the Power CD. I had one of these. It sat in this weird way on your desk taking up a ton of space and the disk was held at an angle and you plugged it into your Mac and you were able to read data off of a CD-ROM. You used it to play some of those early multimedia CD-ROMs on your Mac. A lot of these were sold basically so people could play games like Myst. And pretty soon Apple was putting the optical drives into the Macs themselves so an external one wasn't needed anymore. And here's a peripheral that isn't for a Mac. It's for an iPod. Apple actually produced a speaker set that you put your iPod in to the top of. It was a precursor to the HomePod. It was just completely offline. You had to plug the iPod into the top and then you control the iPod as normal, it would just play through the speakers. Now those three peripherals could be seen as pioneers in their individual classes. Apple was either first or near the first to come out with them. And for some other peripherals, Apple actually really did change the industry. These next three are examples. The first is the Apple Laserwriter. If you think of which companies pioneered laser printing, you're probably thinking of printer companies like HP. But in fact, Apple had one of the very first laser printers out there. I mean, this thing was out in 1985. But the Laserwriter 2, this model here, that was quite a machine. I used one of these for years. They worked really well and without much trouble. And using one of these, you were able to replace much more expensive machinery. I'll bet there's still some Laserwriter 2s out there that work just perfectly. Apple also pioneered the digital camera. And when you think of digital cameras, you probably think of the big camera companies. But Apple was actually one of the first companies with the digital camera out. Now check this out. This thing took pictures at the resolution of 640 by 480. That's it. And it only had enough memory to store 8 of those pictures at a time. But it was still quite a revolution. At the company I was working for at the time, we used to have a Polaroid camera, take a Polaroid of something we needed a picture of, and then scan it in with a scanner. This thing made that process a whole lot simpler. You just take the picture, transfer it to your computer, and you had a digital photo right away. Apple was also pretty early in with scanners. It looked like this, and like the Laserwriter, it was really solidly built. It was built to be used every day over and over again in business settings. Now all of these products are long gone now. Only collectors really have them. But a lot of these really pioneered their individual product categories. After all, it really was in Apple's interest to come out with new ways to use computers so they could sell more of them. Apple really doesn't come out with these kinds of things anymore. One reason may be because there are so many startup companies out there that Apple really doesn't need to pioneer these anymore. Another company will do it. But another reason may be that Apple still actually comes out with products like this. They just are hugely successful. I mean, things like the iPhone, the iPad, Apple TV, AirPods, and the Apple Watch are products quite like these. The difference is that they're so hugely successful, we don't consider them sideshows. They are central products. So it may not be that Apple doesn't come out with products like this anymore. They just come out with products that are so good that they stick around. Hope you found this interesting. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.